opportunity for a reset, for a reset, for a reset, for a reset.
But they also don't want any scrutiny of this grand reset the Prime Minister is now talking about. This idea that he's going to renovate Canadian society to fit his Trudeaupian ambitions.
There's many countries out there who censor the internet. North Korea and China are the two main culprits. Is Canada going to join them with the Bill C-11? We've got Sheila Gunn Reid on the radio, and she's going to discuss how this is going to affect Rebel News and other programming like my YouTube program or Mr. Sunshine Baby, or let's say live streams of events that happen like the trucker convoy or the Parents' March. We won't ever see the truth. The only truth you will ever see is a mistruth, misinformation given to you by CBC. Let's have a listen to what Sheila Gunn Reid has to say on this subject.
So I think the devil will be in the details. First of all, I'm opposed to government registration of any form of media. I just, the idea that this is modernizing the CRTC, I don't think they understand what that word means, because what they're doing is something akin to what they did with typewriters in 1960s East Germany, where you had to submit a sample of, typing that came off your typewriter in case something rolled off the keys that was offensive to the government. This harkens back to those times. Now, the government is saying and that this will apply to streaming services of over $10 million and more. But as I said, the devil's in the details, because I wanted to know, well, why the heck do you even need to register with the government? The government knows that Netflix exists and Wondery exists and Spotify exists. They already know these things, so why do you have to report to them? Well, if you look at why the government wants this information, they're saying that this is not the end of the information they're asking for. What they're saying is this is just the beginning. They want to identify the streaming services because they're coming back for more information. And I think for the smaller people who use these streaming platforms, this is where they might get caught in all of that. So I think it's first identify who the streaming services are, and then identify the contributors. If you look directly into the decision by the CRTC, it says the registration regulations are meant to provide the Commission with information about online undertakings and their activities in Canada, which would give the Commission an initial understanding of the Canadian online broadcasting landscape and would allow it to communicate with online undertakings. The information collected would allow the Commission to assess whether other obligations are needed and to seek further information where necessary. And I think that's where it's going to start hitting the other smaller people who use these platforms. This is just the beginning. It's not the end.
So what we can see is that this is just the start. They're going to start by collecting information about all the different people who post online and then work the way down to the smaller programs, I would think. Do you think that's what's going to happen?
They're saying that the proposed policy direction, once finalized, would then guide the Commission in its implementation of the amended Broadcasting Act. So the Commission also notes that the proposed direction has not yet been finalized. So, as I said, this is the beginning of legislation and registration with the government, and it's not the end. And we don't have to look that far in Liberal government history to see when they say their legislation is going to do one thing, and in the end, in practice, it does something entirely different. I'm a gun owner, and I'm a Westerner, so I'm acutely attuned to how registration often leads to confiscation or at least, strong control. With the government's most recent rollout of gun control legislation, they said it wouldn't touch hunters and sport shooters, and then that was the bulk of what they attempted to control or prohibit. And I think we're going to see many of the same promises made here. Well, this isn't going to touch the little guy. This isn't going to affect small independent journalists. For me, when they introduced this modernization of the CRTC and made the CRTC suddenly all of a sudden responsible for the internet as opposed to old terrestrial TV and radio.
So do you think that the CRT will be strictly monitoring and curating content that will be able to be made on platforms that will be given the red light to go ahead after strict, probably strict mandating on what they can and what they can't report.
Of course. And I think the reason, and I come at this through a conservative journalist worldview, just so you know where my bias is coming from. I'll divulge my bias, unlike my peers at the CBC. But that's, I think, why there is this all of a sudden desire to control the internet, is because that independent journalism is where the largest critiques of the current government are coming from. And so that's where this direction now, we have these independent journalists, they're going around traditional control of the CRTC, speaking directly to the people, getting access to politicians, and now, the attempts are to rein that back in.
So Sheila, what do you think will happen to Rebel News? Will you toe the line? Do you think you'll be exempt from it? Do you think Rebel News will go on and on? Or do you think the government's going to just shut everything down?
Would not benefit from it. We would never benefit from it. It is our journalistic mandate to viciously protect our independence from the government. So we reject any sort of government control or any sort of government handout. We know with the government so often the open hand giving you a subsidy is also the other hand a fist smashing you into compliance. And so, if you look at the models of the news organizations that are doing well right now, that are growing, that are hiring, and I'd like to think that Rebel News is one of those outlets. Those are the media outlets that are doing something different. They're not taking handouts from the government, and they are rejecting the old ways of doing things. And I think the longer the government, claims to support media, the quicker it will spell the demise of traditional media, because people no longer trust it. It appears to be contaminated by government funds, and they'll never get the market correction I think they so rightly deserve. The government is stopping news from innovating by giving it money to continue to do the same old thing that doesn't work.
So glad I caught that interview with Sheila Gunn-Reid. Great explanation as to why Bill C-11 and this mandate of registering all these podcasts and programs, streaming services, is just going to be a huge slippery slope. Now Pierre Poilievre has said he would cancel this. So we need to at least get to a point where we can get rid of Trudeau and get Poilievre in and get this cancelled, so we can get back to free speech in Canada. Till next time, guys.